Alrighty, welcome everyone. If you're just now joining us, welcome to the Notre Dame Student Peace Conference. If you've been with us all weekend, I think it's safe to say that we are very excited for today's keynote session led by Alexis Templeton. A native of Ferguson, Missouri, Alexis is known for their protest work during the Ferguson Uprising and as a co-founder of Millennial Activists United. After Mike Brown's murder, Templeton dropped out of college in order to commit to full-time organizing. It was during this period that MAU was formed with co-founder Brittany Farrell, where they organized a multitude of actions across the city that sought to disrupt business as usual, and urged people to break their silence and take action. Focusing on disruption as one of the many strategies for social change, MAU was committed to reinvigorating the importance of civil disobedience through organizing and mobilizing hundreds into action to take a stand against racial injustice. Grounded in these strategies, MAU disrupted daily activities to confront the ways that state oppression disrupts Black livelihood. Under Alexis's leadership, MAU was able to accomplish notable achievements across the city of St. Louis, including #BlackChurch, #BlackBrunch, and the shutting down of a major highway as we saw last night in the screening of Whose Streets. After politically targeted arrests and prosecution by the St. Louis County powers that be, MAU is rendered inactive for now, though its reputation lives on through the stories and work of its founders. As such, this reputation is constantly building and evolving, especially as it lives on within Alexis, who, among others, took the former Chief of Police, Sam Dotson, and the entire St. Louis Police Department to court for excessive tactics during Ferguson, including the department's indiscriminate use of tear gas and militarized weaponry. Templeton v. Dotson ruled in Templeton's favor and dramatically changed the way in which St. Louis police interacts with peaceful protesters. Because of this ruling, there is now a police-required warning before imminent tear gas, and that police give protesters reasonable time to disperse. The effects of this ruling have had sweeping consequences across the nation in the ways that police departments deal with peaceful protesters, especially after the death of Freddie Gray in Baltimore, Stephon Clark in Sacramento, and beyond. Alexis's work and commitment to Black liberation has been recognized both locally in St. Louis, but also on an international stage. They've been highlighted by countless journals and media outlets that include, but are not limited to, Amnesty International, Essence Magazine, Huffington Post, the Al Jazeera Media Network, Ebony Magazine, Vibe, BuzzFeed, The Guardian, and countless others. In 2016, they received the Elliott Black Award from the American Ethical Union for their engagement within a queer, youth-led grassroots movement that is attentive to ending racial injustice and police brutality in America. Today, as a rising gender nonconforming scholar studying psychology at Washington University in St. Louis, Templeton spends their time building community on campus, reading and writing. They plan to attend graduate school next year to pursue a PhD in African American Studies. Templeton's future doctoral work will consider the intersections of the Black barbershop, queer identity, and mental health as spaces for new subjectivities for building and sustaining community. These goals and their prior activism in Ferguson dovetail seamlessly into their life's mission to center Black people in their efforts and endeavors forever. At just 24, Alexis's unique and ongoing commitment towards empowering Black women, Black youth, and Black queer folks through proxies and scholarship is unwavering, fearless, and awe-inspiring. Titled No Justice, No Peace, The Realities and Struggles of Resistance, we are humbled and honored that Alexis has agreed to speak here today and present some unique insights on how the abstract concepts of peace and justice present themselves in their work and daily life. It is a true privilege to welcome them here to the stage today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our 2018 keynote speaker, Alexis Templeton.
Oh, good afternoon. Wow, I should adjust this. Thank you for having me. It's truly an honor to be here. It feels good to be in spaces where there is an attempt to make conversation happen about real issues, because then there is hope that these important conversations can become more than that. They can become reality. Before I begin, I want to take a moment to thank my mom and my grandma for being here today. There is something special in knowing that I'm, you should. There is something special in knowing that I'm constantly making my parents proud, and I know that they are both in constant awe of who I'm becoming. They don't always know where I'm headed, but they trust me enough to let me roam and support me regardless of where I end up. I would be nothing without a love like that, without a support like that. I love y'all. While I've always been familiar with Black struggle, I was never immersed in it. As a freedom fighter like the folks that I admired, Angela Davis, Assata, Huey Newton. I read the books about Black freedom struggle, and I've always been able to talk the talk, but Mike Brown pulled my card. Either I was gonna be about that talk, or I was gonna stay in the house. So I hit the streets. I hit the ground in Ferguson after arriving from a family visit in Arizona. I watched the city explode from my phone while I was out of town, and I couldn't get over how this situation was unfolding minutes from my house. The revolution had come to my doorstep and knocked for my attention. I arrived at home fresh off the plane, and like I did every night, I began contemplating suicide. For a year, I had been at a point of depression where all I wanted to do was die, but my spirit told me otherwise that night. That night, I ruled out the possibility of ending my own life because the desire to contribute to something bigger than me overruled my desire to die. I got on Twitter, found out where people were meeting, and I walked out the door. From this moment forward, Michael Brown began to save my life. I believe it's important to understand where people were in their lives before they rose to an insufferable prominence. Too often, the bravery of the Ferguson freedom fighters overshadows their humanity, their ups and downs, their complexities and ills. I want that to stop. I want you to see more than tanks and tear gas. I want you to hear about more than rubber bullets and being arrested. I am not here to paint I am not here to paint a romanticized picture of the Ferguson uprising for you. I believe that picture is illustrious enough. I am not here to ease one into the deep water of Black resistance or to champion one's moral compass. I am not here to make you feel good about being on the right side of justice or to give you a pat on the back for recognizing that enough is enough. If you are present here today, I assume you are a comrade in this fight, and I am here to bring a perspective that draws you out of your seats to organize harder, to organize stronger, and to organize better. I'm here to bring a perspective that is going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to make you shift in your seat. It is going to seem like I am pointing the finger at you, like I'm giving you the finger. And make no mistake, I am. Across class, across gender, across sexuality, it should be recognized that Black people have a fundamental right, an earned right, to a life free from anxiety, free from constant violence and death, free from the oppressive hands of this country that we have built. We deserve generations that do not know poverty, that do not experience violence created for them, that do not live in fear. If we cannot obtain our fundamental needs, if our existence cannot be respected, then this country deserves to burn. Whether it will burn is another conversation, but know that the heat from the flames is warranted. Know that riot is righteous. There is a war across the diaspora, a war on every person who is of African descent. White supremacy wages a war on anyone who does not fit into its box and kills anyone who dares to redefine it. There are so many bodies under attack because white supremacy says they are not good enough. There is so much humanity spurned so that white people can live in comfort. But I am here to advocate for niggas. The Black Americans that are always conveniently at the bottom of the barrel. The Black Americans who are not respectable enough, who are too loud, who don't care about your comfort because they are hungry, because this country is starving them, and because you are complicit. Niggas are Black Americans who are constantly forced to own and reclaim an identity forced upon them by this country. Nigga is not just a term of endearment here, it is political. Niggas are who America have created by their own definition and through their oppressive actions. I am going to center niggas in all of our beauty and all of our pain because someone has to, because we deserve to be centered. Harry Belafonte came to visit protesters and organizers some months after the uprising started. He talked about the importance of this moment and what it can mean for liberation. He gave us history and wisdom to better strategize. One of the most important things that he said, something that I will never forget, was about how to win. He said, King was able to win over America because he was able to put a mirror to its face and showcase it to the world. America was forced to look at itself, and looking at its reflection is something that America cannot afford. This wisdom affirmed how our organization, Millennial Activists United, was showing up already and influenced how we organized going forward. We had to ask ourselves better questions in order to become better organizers. How do we impel the state to look at its actions? How do we force it to reflect on the dehumanization of Black people? Our answer was through direct action. The first Action Mile did was at Frontenac, a high-end shopping mall in St. Louis. We collaborated with another comrade, Jamel Spann. It took place on the movement's first Moral Monday. Moral Monday was a day of direct action within different parts of the city. We noticed that disruption was happening, but it wasn't happening in all of the places it needed to. It was not happening in the suburbs of St. Louis. The white middle class and the white elites minutes away knew nothing of our pain. They knew of the media's narrative. They were the audience for a truth that was a lie. We organized a group of people to march through the mall and disrupt the space. There is a misconception of what protest is, as if it is simple and impulsive, as if it does not require strategy or thought. Direct action requires paranoia, responsibility, and diligence to ensure safety, to establish trust, and to center impact and intention. You want people to know why you are there, and you want to say the things you never want them to forget. The group was told to enter different parts of the mall and roam until they were given a cue to start chanting. Entering the mall without disruption forced shoppers to realize that something was different. It established discomfort, and we were there to welcome it. Chanting was specifically important for me because it ensured a tone of intention. It is the inside voice of those who are silenced. We disrupted for a moment, and eventually we were told to leave, or we would be subject to arrest. This is the moment where people start thinking about their jobs, their kids, their parents, their livelihood outside of the uprising. Are we taking this risk? Is this the right thing to do? Are we making this sacrifice? We made the decision beforehand that this was not an arrestable action, and we stuck to that plan, so we moved our protest to the sidewalk. Direct action is about disciplined rage. Direct action is a form of communication in the most explicit sense. We received a mixture of reactions from those we encountered that day. Regardless, comfort was disrupted, peace of mind disturbed. Stand in our shoes for a moment. Think about why we are here. Eventually, we gathered our group, asked what improvements we could make for next time, and it was back to the drawing board. Direct action is about constructive criticism and effective communication. It helps you become a better leader. Direct action is confrontational because it is an inconvenience, a disruption with a statement. It is about truth. Direct action brings what one ignores to the surface, to one's attention. Direct action is a mirror that is directly in front of your face. Direct action isn't asking you to look in the mirror, it's making you. I remember having to be on Twitter consistently while we were trying not to be snatched and grabbed by the police, trying to record the words they were saying to us, how careless they were with their chemical munitions, how careless they were with our lives. Through social media, we were trying to combat the narrative that would air on television in the morning. Either it was a peaceful night, even though we had been gassed and forced to scurry like roaches, or it was a night of unlawful protest and looting. They did not capture the unity we built, the unity we practiced. They did not capture the community we built, the unity we practiced. There was a need for the media to create a dichotomy that identified protesters as violent and law enforcement as heroic. There was a need to protect the police and find purpose behind their terror. Nuance does not exist in a dichotomy, and in this instance, neither did the truth. The police had murdered someone, yet their position of power gave them the benefit of the doubt. The power of the people was criminal. It's just what we are taught that makes sense, though, right? We are supposed to be able to trust authority, and we are taught that authority is objective and safe. We are socialized to believe a concept that does not apply to everyone in society. We are socialized to defend a theory that is oppressive in practice. Objectivity is a privilege. Safety is a privilege. Privileges that are not afforded to Black people. During the uprising, organizers were being trained to counter questions that reporters would ask, questions that were insensitive and meant to deter the purpose of the interview, questions that were intentionally obtuse and coded with racist undertones. The media was intentionally seeking out Black people whose righteous anger did not fit their standards of articulation to paint our rage as illogical, to illustrate our humanity as inferior. It became more and more clear what we were up against. We were not only up against the destruction of our bodies, we were up against a system that would justify it. They would justify it because of our rage, because of our reactions to their violence. They put their feet on our necks and blamed us when we broke their windows with ours. They pointed their guns at us and blame us when we point them at each other. What other way to obtain power do we know? Black people are birthed in violence and spend our entire lives experiencing it. Ferguson was not just about police brutality. Ferguson was an expose of an American tradition, a reminder of an American fact, America is not only going to kill black people, but America is going to look in the eyes of its citizens and tell them that black people deserved it. They are going to believe this lie because it further protects their truth. Black people are going to condition themselves into complacency in order to survive. Black people are dying, and it is intentional. It is genocide. There is destruction in freedom and reflection. This makes reflection one of the most fundamental elements of change. Reflection is about accountability. It is about a critical analysis of what one considers moral and how they practice it. Reflection is about an understanding of history. It is about getting to the bottom of dark moments. Justice begins to breathe when we begin to see ourselves. What is the reflection in the context of America? What is reflection in the context of Ferguson? White people must begin to see how the identity they have created for themselves has come at the expense of stripping black people of theirs. Further, white people must see why it is necessary to create this identity in the first place. Why does white identity and the consistent protection of it come at the expense of black lives? White people must explore their desire to create and sustain systems and institutions that perpetuate violence against black people. Who are you protecting? What are you protecting? White people must trouble the narratives they have always been taught. White people must listen to the narratives they are taught to ignore. White people have to realize that through their dehumanization of black people, they have dehumanized themselves. This is reflection. This is accountability. This is the beginnings of justice. Once there is reflection and realization, there will be no peace. There will be chaos. This chaos will come because white people will no longer know who they are. In this mirror, they will confront a truth that will dismiss who they have defined themselves to be. James Baldwin puts it more eloquently. In My Dungeon Shook, he writes, "Any upheaval in the universe is terrifying because it so profoundly attacks one's sense of one's own reality." The truth of white identity is going to shake America to its core. It's going to disrupt everything white people have been told, everything they have learned. It is going to shatter their world, and it should. During an interview in 1963, James Baldwin was asked his opinion on the future of the country. The interviewer expresses that he believes that the future of the country and the future of black people are linked. They're insoluble, Baldwin agrees. He elaborates, "The future of the Negro in this country is precisely as bright or as dark as the future of the country." He states that the future of the country depends on whether white people look in the mirror and see themselves, whether they find an explanation for the degradation of black people. What white people have to do is try to find in their own hearts why it was necessary to create a nigger in the first place, he proclaims. He reminds us that he is not a nigger, he is a man. But if you think I'm a nigger, he states, it means you need it. The future of the country is dependent on the moment white people look in the mirror and can explain why they will devalue an entire demographic of people because they need to establish value within themselves. What Baldwin describes is an illustration of the Ferguson uprising and what it did to the country, what it forced the entire world to see. Ferguson freedom fighters were able to bring America to its knees because we would not put the mirror down, because Mike Brown's life goal was to shake the world, and we did not stop until we shook America at its core. Ferguson made me recognize the reality of what it takes for black people to get free. Ferguson showed the world what freedom would take and what freedom really means. Ferguson scared white people. Ferguson jolted the system, so they worked to eliminate the sparks of the Ferguson flame. My intuition told me the highway action was not a good idea. Yeah. Mal had clearly become a target to the state. We could not be visible at many protests any longer because we were subject to being singled out and arrested. The 1-year anniversary of Mike Brown's murder was a full weekend of events. The last day of events was on a Monday. Naturally, the day was organized as a day of direct action. The intention was to stop the highway at one of the most important times of the day, rush hour. The aim was to confront white flight. We were going to them. The plan was flawless, and the execution had been practiced, ensuring perfection. We managed to bring one of the most important highways in St. Louis to a standstill in both directions during one of the most important times of the day, when people are on their way home from work. specifically white people traveling to St. Charles, Missouri, which is a predominantly white city in Missouri that is the poster child of white flight. I did not participate in any of the organizing of this action, but as a comrade and as a partner, you never let your right hand do anything without its left. Nearing the end of the action, a white woman became impatient. She began to inch her SUV into the knees of the individual's locked arms in front of her bumper. People were telling her to be mindful of her actions, of their purpose of being on the highway at all. She informed them that she did not care, that she was trying to get home to her black partner and black kids. People were trying to get pictures of her license plate and of her face, so she rolls her window down all the way and sticks both of her middle fingers out of the window to fully illustrate her ignorance to the group. She continued to push her car forward. Brittany, Miles' co-founder, who was responsible for every human body occupying this space, hops off the median and kicks the woman's driver's side door. She firmly tells her, "Stop fucking trying to run people over." The woman looks at Brittany. She says nothing and hits her gas pedal where she takes off through the crowd. In an attempt to protect my comrades, I punched her in the face. Honestly, I am sure that I would not change a thing about my actions if I had the ability to do it again. I remember discussing my court case with my lawyer and learning how political the case was. I went into the case terribly naive. I was used to being arrested, being in jail for up to 24 hours and released. The random resisting arrests and disturbing the peace charges were nothing compared to what I was looking at here. I was scared out of my mind. All I could hear in my head was my dad warning me about getting into trouble with the state. He said dealing with them people was a type of fall that is not in your hands. How far you fall is completely up to them, he said bluntly. I believed I was the exception. I expected the right to a fair trial. I expected the space to tell my story and fight for my innocence. Right. I quickly learned that this was something deeper than that. This entire process was much bigger than my actions. This was an attack on me, to silence my voice, to strip me of my power, to defeat me. And it did. I beat myself up internally for the entire court process, a duration of 2 years and 3 months, for defending myself and defending my comrades. The plea bargain offered to me was 30 days in jail and restitution to the impatient white woman who committed an act of violence and used her vehicle as a weapon. Plea bargains are a systematic form of entrapment. The state forces you to admit wrongdoing because this is better than the odds of standing before a jury, whether you're innocent or not. Just like in the books, it did not matter what my side of the story was or what all had transpired. Justice looks one way in this country, and it is never in favor of black people. Knowing that justice to the state was injustice for me was enough for me to give in. My lawyer at the time told me this was my best bet, and I knew in that moment that even he was not advocating for me in the way he was supposed to. I wasn't sure if it was because he was a terrible lawyer or that the politics of this case caused him to put in as little effort as possible, but he was not concerned with my freedom. He was focused on his image. The duration of this case was a time of complete paranoia. I did not know who to trust, and I did not know who to believe, yet I had no choice but to trust and believe a stranger. I was instructed not to go to trial because I would be subject to an all-white jury whose minds were already made up. I would not be receiving justice, I would be receiving punishment. Not just punishment for my actions on the highway, but punishment for being a driving force in America's current process of reflection. I wasn't on trial for punching a white woman in the face. I was on trial for the movement. I was simply an example for the state to advertise its threat to those still in the streets, to those holding thoughts of rising up. Political persecution is an experience of warfare. It is watching two people you do not know argue for the state of your freedom. Their words and arguments are the determining factor of your life. It is a position that forces you to be silent, that doesn't care for your truth. Political persecution teaches you about isolation. It has the goal of complacency. It is how the state strips black folks of their autonomy, of their resistance. Political persecution is the state's battle against black resilience. It was a systemic execution of the leadership and organizing that came out of Ferguson. It was a fundamental route to shutting us up. Political persecution is a reminder of who justice is applicable to. It is a declaration of who is in charge. Political persecution is not about what an individual is being charged with. It is about the presence that they possess, the power that they hold. Political persecution is the state trying to destroy that presence, to take back that power. When I discovered that the theme of this conference was about the intersections of justice and peace, I knew that I immediately wanted to get into some theory. Then I remembered that the theory does not matter because all Black people know is practicality. And the practicality of justice looks different than the theory. A system grounded in racism ensures that Black people are unaware of the definition of justice via the experience systematic racism creates for them. What does experience look like? It looks like lynching. It looks like voter suppression. It looks like housing discrimination. It looks like police brutality. It looks like inability to access clean water. It looks like food deserts. It looks like political persecution. And what peace is in any of that? These are everyday disruptions of peace. These are everyday acts of injustice. These are examples of what Black people know. This is all we know. What is the intersection of justice and peace? What is at the intersection of justice and peace? At the intersection of justice and peace is a riot. There is an uproar in favor of flames that besiege an oppressive foundation. There are people, mostly poor and working class folks, who are angry, who are tired, who no longer give a fuck. There is a standoff between these people and a militarized police force. There is tear gas. There is violent arrests. There are bricks and rocks being thrown. There are people fighting back because they are tired of their maltreatment. They are here to take back their power, and if it will not be given to them, they will take it. At the intersections of justice and peace, there is Ferguson. There is an uprising. Thank you.
So we're going to open it up for questions. We'll be bringing around a microphone, so. Hello, 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 hello.
Are we all on? We're all on? Perfect. My name is David Anderson Hooker. I'm one of the faculty here. I really, really, really appreciate your being here and the commitment to an unvarnished presentation, not trying to make it, sufficiently polite and comfortable for people to be okay, but to give us actually what you think is important for us to hear.
Yes, sir.
Right? I'm an alum of WashU. One of the places I'm alum of is Washington University. Exactly. And I know that you wanted to stay in practicality and avoid theory, but what I want to do is invite just a little bit of riffing and reflection on a piece of theory that came out of WashU. In the 1980s, there were two really significant faculty at Washington University. Elaine Pender-Hughes, who talked about the way that power shapes identity and shapes relationships. And then there was a guy named Bobby E. Wright, who crafted a concept of menticide, the systematic destruction of a group of people's minds with the ultimate aim being the complete extirpation of the race. Just for a moment, sit inside the way that menticide and power have shaped kind of the gulf between what the millennial action looks like and what kind of civil rights, polite ways of protesting look like and what they were encouraging you all to do in Ferguson.
Yes. That was great. That's a whole paper. Thank you. We often are the Black Lives Matter movement, and speaking in the context of Ferguson, is also compared to the Civil Rights Movement. It was done like that from the early days, and figuring how are we going to show up like King? How are we going to show up like the people who follow King? And to trouble that thought, I think the youth were frankly like, fuck that, you know? And it was more so a turn our back on our elders kind of thing. You know, y'all had your chance. This is our chance. You did it this way. We want to do it this way. We need to do it this way. We don't know how to do it any other way. You have not taught us that. You have not passed that down. And so bringing it back to reflection, that was a moment of reflection for the elders. Like, wow, we really messed up. We dropped the ball a little bit. And that reflection is able to create some inner chaos within the activist community. But there's a great discussion to be had from that. What can we take from what King did and the civil rights movement, and what can we bring to our movement? How can we bring it to our movement, and then how can we do it better? Because this is not a separate movement. This is all a spectrum. It's all a spectrum. And I think that's one of the things that the younger people had to realize, including myself. I had to realize that this is just an ongoing fight. That this is just our ongoing struggle. That this was just a passing of the torch. And while the police kept that alive, that's simply just what it was. I'm not sure if I'm getting to really the theory that you're talking about, although I do appreciate it. I would like to read more before I jump in and just engage off the definitions that you gave me, but I hope I'm giving some type of response to what you're saying. Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Sarah, and I'm also from the South Carolina, and it's very glaring just how institutionalized racism still is there. The legacies of everything is just so glaring, yet there's such a clear denial, I think, of people that it exists, or I'm not racist because I have black friends, or it's just a discussion, or like people like who own their family own plantations. Like for instance, there's a plantation not too far from where I live, and you go there to the museum, it's like the Bratons were very nice to their slaves, and so it's just kind of like this, I think, a denial of it. And I was wondering, how does it feel for you to speak kind of like to a group of white people who necessarily aren't aware of this and aren't comfortable with confronting it in a way, like how do you make them realize that these are realities, and how would you also go about addressing it, and like how can we're complicit to it, but where is also the role for white people wanting to change in this movement?
For sure. So your first thought was how does it make you feel? Yeah, it pisses me off. It's pretty interesting transitioning from being out in the streets and then going straight into the institution, specifically WashU. There's a lot of privilege at WashU because there's so much money, so many white people. And we sit in these classes and people have to go down to the very basics to explain to white people their complicity, their errors, the ways in which they've been instructed. And watching people shift in their seats is pretty comforting because it's like, yeah, this is what it's like. But then there's also the frustration that St. Louis is a pillar for protest right now. It's a flame still. People are still out there. And to know that students in such an institution won't step out and go see for themselves, but want to know how they can help. How can white people help? How can we help further your cause? Well, you can start by showing up. And that's always my first go-to. Go out into the community. It's black people here. It's black people here. I don't know where they are. It was my first question when I got off the plane. But no. Please go to black communities, and please don't go and go and like as you're going to a museum. This isn't the art museum. Black communities are not the zoo. But you should go and you should get some food, and you should have a conversation with somebody. A lot of the workers, I'm sure, at your university are people of color, and mostly black people. They are like that at WashU. Talk to them. Talk to the people who give you your food here. Because they don't live in the Notre Dame bubble that you do. They go home. They experience a different Indiana than you may. I don't know how many people are from here. I don't want to assume. But talk to people. Get insight. Go outside. Show up. When somebody dies, show up, and show up before they die. What was you had the third part. How can my mental health, how does it make me feel, and what do I do? That was your other part. What I do is I disrupt, and I'm gonna say what I think I've done my part in putting my body on the line, and I don't think I'll ever do that again. But I definitely will always speak my mind. I definitely will tell you where you fucked up, and where you're wrong, and where you need to do better, and where you should read, and what books you should read, and how you should read them, and what pages you should go to. I think that being in school has allowed me to intellectualize my experience. I did not have that theory and this ability to talk in such an articulate way about what I've experienced. But being in school and reading books and not having nothing to do with reading books, it is so amazing to get paid to read. And to read and to understand and to have stats and to be able to have page numbers and research to send people to be like, no, I'm not just saying you were fucked up or what's happening, so that it actually is, and here it is. And I think that's a big part to start having conversation. I think those statistics and those facts and that research is a mirror in itself. It's a look at this. This is undeniable. This is on paper. This is happening outside, and it's right here. So what are you gonna do about it? I think it's less about what do I do and more about how do I put this burden on your plate? Because I'm tired of carrying it, dog. It's not mine to hold anymore. It's yours. What are you going to do with it? I got 3 hands. We're gonna start this way.
My name is Maggie McConaughey, and I'm wondering, how do you react to the media's portrayal of March for Our Lives versus Black Lives Matter?
Oh, it's comical. I chortle so much. It's great. It's hilarious. I love the word chortle, by the way. I think I think this is where we talk about intersection. The word intersectionality gets tossed around so much that it loses its meaning. But I think it's important here because I think Black people have been protesting and talking about gun violence for a long time. One of the deflections of people being out in the streets was, but what about Chicago? What about shooting each other? You're killing each other. Why wouldn't we kill you? Okay, but if you weren't just trying to deflect and you actually knew what was going on, you would see that people outside of protesting police brutality also hold marches where they march up and down. The north side of St. Louis is the hood, and they march up and down those streets and they carry signs that say "Stop the Violence." And they try to have conversations with these young guys and these young folks to start looking at each other differently, to start seeing each other differently, to not look at each other in the way that the oppressor has painted you. They do gun buyback programs and all types of things like that. And so to not notice that, but to have such an impeccable reaction and such an advocacy for these kids who are out here like, we just want to go to school, we don't want to die. And it's just like, dog, I want to go home and I don't want to die. I want to wear a hoodie. I want to be able to go get some Skittles and not die. I want to be able to get some Rellos or go whatever Mike Brown was doing. I want to be able to do that, and I want to be able to get home. And my mama wants me to be able to get home. And all these people in this front row just want to see me get home, and we can't do that. But let's glorify how you don't want to go to school and get shot up. Sure. So that's my reaction. Yes.
I find it really interesting that you were arrested for touching someone, especially because this was such a movement about civil disobedience, and civil disobedience often has the connotation that it really has to be nonviolent. So I was wondering what the role of nonviolence was in your organization with MAU and how you guys kind of worked with the theory of nonviolence and then how it came out into practice, and like if it was useful or totally not useful at all.
It's a great question, and that kind of is going to go back to your question a little bit too. I watched this interview with Stokely Carmichael, and he said, it's in the Eyes of the Prize documentary, if y'all want to watch it. He's like, he basically says the nonviolence is a strategy. We all had guns. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were prepared to defend ourselves because we knew that we had to. It's almost, it's naive to think that this is just going to be a completely nonviolent movement. We're going against violence. Why wouldn't we have some moments where we're going to be violent? And the role of our organization, again, is a strategy, taking that that language and that discourse and applying it directly into how our organization moves through direct actions. Sometimes it's just going to be what it's got to be. And that sucks. And sometimes you just got to take an L, and we did that. Sometimes it comes down to hitting somebody in the face. And that's just the reality of it. Did I know that in that moment? Absolutely not. There's something to talk about in the meetings, like, oh, I would have did this, I would have did that, just to be funny. But everything is going to happen until it does. Until it's impulse, until it's intuition, until it's like, it just is what it's going to be. You know what I'm saying? And so I believe that, I know that Mal wanted to be a nonviolent organization. And they, we wanted to paint ourselves in that way. But going up against where we're up against, I do not think that nonviolence is the right tactic. I believe that it's the right tactic in the beginning. I think that's going back to what I said in my speech about Harry Belafonte, that's the way that King was able to win, by being like, you can't fight me if I'm not fighting you. And look at what you're doing. Look at yourself. The world is looking at you right now. And I think that Ferguson was able to do that perfectly as well, in a different way, but they were able to do that as well. We were able to do that as well. And at some point, you just get tired. At some point, you get tired of people pointing AR-15s at you and saying all types of crazy stuff to you while you're just trying to get to your car after you just got tear gas, while you're trying to wipe mace out your eyes. You know what I'm saying? Like when you got people grabbing you and throwing you to the ground in the movie, and I think it's in there. Did you all see the guy get slammed on the highway? That's insane. What are we saying? Why wouldn't I respond with violence if you're doing something to me like that? You know what I mean? He's better than me, really. Because that's asinine to me to think that I'm just supposed to take whatever you throw out and I'm not supposed to push back. I wasn't raised like that, and nobody in this room was raised like that. And that's just unfair to apply that to a people that you're just consistently violent to. In your words, in your actions, in your thoughts, in the way that you move, even if it's just, passive aggressive, the violence is still there. How do you not expect me to respond in such a way? And then also, further, you have to think about the conditions in which situate black people to be angry all the time. Oh, people are hungry. People just trying to get to work and can't because the bus is late. You know what I'm saying? Like, people can't get on the bus. They're scared to get on the bus because they might got a little weed and they decide to help with anxiety because weed is just so great for anxiety now, right? Black people do that for a long time. And we sitting in jail for it. That's violence. Now there are multimillionaires making more and more millions off weed, and there are black folks sitting in jail for it for years. And it's just unfair. So the way I react to that type of violence is, how about I'm going to smoke my weed? How about I'm going to do what I'm going to do? How about I'm going to do what I want to do? How about I just want you to leave me alone? How about I talk to you and address you in the ways that you address me? And we'll go from there. But turning the other cheek and looking the other way, that's done for it. So that's how I respond to violence. And that's how, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so
I see you, bro.
yeah. So kind of in relation, you talked about preparing for media questions very intentionally, and I want to know if you could elaborate on some of the ways that you and the people you were working with kind of prepared to bridge the gap between we're ready to do this, we're going to go out, and actually the car is like coming at our knees and we're in this moment. How did you kind of prep people to be in that space?
We didn't prepare for the woman to run through, or we didn't even think about the thought of somebody running through. We just kind of gave people the benefit of the doubt. We gave people the grace of humanity and said, there is no human. There's not one who is going to run through people on a highway. And that woman just proved us wrong, and that is fascinating to me. But we were not prepared for that. And I talked about the media, but I did not talk to the media because I was not prepared to talk to the media. I think they started to be strategic about who they put in front of cameras, which is why you see a lot of DeRays, which is why you see your Brittany Packnets. You know what I'm saying? They're able to talk to white people in a way that I'm just not going to address you. I'm going to be hostile because I am angry and I'm righteous in that way. They were pulling, your lower class black folks onto the camera to talk about their rage, and they were just highlighting how upset they were. Like, oh, like look at them. You know, you would read the comments, never read the comments, but you would read the comments and you would see people saying such horrible things like, oh, this is why this is happening because they're not educated. You can't even speak right. And it's just like, that's not even the point. And so your question was, can you say it for me again?
Yeah, just what were some of the ways that you prepared for kind of the, getting between we're going to do this and actually how do we stay disciplined and how do we, stay in the space as we're being met with violence?
Understood. So, yeah, I definitely always just try to think about how bad I want someone to see themselves, but also what that repercussion is going to be for me. And in that moment, I lost the thought, and I believe Brittany did too. The tensions were high, we were upset, this woman was tripping, and we're responsible for every single being that's on that highway, not just the people we organize, but also the people in those cars. We're responsible for them. Whatever happens on that highway is going to be on us. Whatever happens to those people is going to be on us. How people get treated in jail, that's on us because those are our people. Those are people that we organize. And so it's constantly having to be in the mindset of you're a leader. You have to be more disciplined than the next person. You got to talk to your comrades and be like, hey, I need you to calm down. And if you're not going to calm down, you got to exit, G. Like, if you're not, or rather, Brittany's favorite part of the movie where she yells, and if people aren't getting on the highway, they need to fucking go. Whatever she said, however she said, I know she cursed at somebody. But just like being very firm and adamant about what we're doing and very intentional about, listen, this is what it is. If you here, are you riding or not? Are you here or not? Are you all in or not? If you're not all in, you gotta go. If you got second thoughts, you're on the wrong side of justice. See you later. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
I think so.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you very much for the work that you have done individually and the courage that it took you to stand up. Actually, want to state the fact. During the same time you were protesting, I had a white person tell me, and as a black immigrant, that I was special because as an immigrant, I was more different than the African Americans that grew up in this country, that I was at the mercy of white people. And I'm so shocked at that statement because whiteness has achieved like oneness in this day that the redhead or the German or the French, they're all the same. But when it comes to we as black people, we're divided into thousands of pieces. And are asked to beg for the mercy of the majority. So my question for you is for the black people, and I'm asked today our conference is about intersectionality of peace and justice. And part of the work that was laid by our forefathers, it always was to come back to the negotiation table. So as someone who is in the struggle of black people, what are the some immediate peace and compromises will you do, and what are the ultimate objective of this new wave of movement that is calling for the dignity of the black people and the pursuit of life?
Yes, for sure. That's a great question. And I'm sorry you had that experience. I think it is about conversation. I think this is where communication becomes really important. I think that's where hard conversations within our communities and within black people across the diaspora need to be harder. They need to be more explicit. We need to be uncomfortable ourselves sometimes. And like I said, I think it's about conversation, and that's just inside the room. But when we go outside, I think it's important that we need to know that it's a united front. We the redheads and Germans and everybody else when we out on that united front. I don't care what happens behind closed doors. What's happening out there is we're a united front, period. So yes, I think it's about communication, and I just think it's so important to start having conversations and to know other people's experiences because we're not a monolith. We're just not a monolith at all. We're so colonized, and there's some folks who are trying to be colonized, and there's some folks who are stuck in it. And conversation has to be had, for real. We gotta hold our own selves accountable to the ways in which we've internalized our oppression and how we take that out on each other within our community and across the diaspora. Did I answer your question? Who had a question?
Yeah, I actually, first of all, I do want to say that just hearing all of that and just watching last night, I am uncomfortable. So thank you for, like you said, pointing the finger at us.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. And I hope I continue to never actually reach a level of comfort, because I know that just means that that's wrong. But my question is actually in regards to communication and how to have those. I like how you said you contextualize yourself, like going and reading and taking that time. And I remember reading once on Twitter how if you can't advocate for someone who hasn't gone to college within your own community, you're not putting your education to work. So how do you feel that, someone who has been on the forefront, who, like you said, you're at the hood versus being at college, where do you make that connection work?
So that's a great question, and I'm gonna put WashU on the spot for a minute because they don't do this well at all. I was brought in by a faculty member. She came to me and she said that she was grateful for what I did. She asked me that I want to go to school for free, and she said this was her way of giving back to Ferguson and to the movement. And the school was on board. They sent me for free. They take really great care of me. We have another activist there, Kayla Reed. She's fantastic. You should look her up. She's there, and then Brittany is coming. Brittany Farrell is coming in the fall. She's going to get her master's in public health. And so what Diana did, her name is Diana Hill Mitchell, and what Diana did was try to bridge that gap. It was try to bring the organizers and the people who have these experiences, who are leading into these institutions, so that we could build community inside the institution, outside of it, and then bridge that gap. We could also take whatever path we wanted to go on, whatever journey we wanted to do to become whoever we wanted to become. And I think that's important because that's when you start getting into different lanes. For example, Kayla is going to be a politician of some sort, and she's a policymaker. She's going to change laws. One day, she's going to change laws. She's doing it right now. She's actually doing a campaign to shut down the workhouse, which is like a big jail in St. Louis. You have Brittany, who is the intersections of health, who's a labor and delivery nurse, who advocates for Black women who have the highest rates of death and infant mortality than any other demographic. And so she's able to bridge that gap. And you have me, who wants to be a professor. So that's my way of organizing students to then get back out in the communities, to not just sit in these classrooms and do this work and get these A's, but the real A, is out there. The real A is at that chicken spot you go to, but you don't talk to nobody yet. The real A is at the fish spot that you don't know about. The real A is talking to the janitors and the people who serve you your food and frankly, being nice to them. And not treating them as if you're better than them, as if they aren't in the same struggle as you are. And I think that's how we bridge the gap. I think that's really about talking. I think it's really about having just normal conversations and joking with folks and letting folks that we got you, we here. You know what I'm saying? That head nod that some of the Black people in the room might be familiar with, that we give everybody when we go somewhere. But giving that head nod and just letting folks know that you got them and you're here, and that they can talk to you and they can approach you just about whatever. I think that's important. I think that's how we start bridging that gap. I think that knowing that we're degreed Black folks from a top 10 institution, an institution at all, and going back to these high schools and talking to folks about how important the college experience is, how important it was for me to have my own space, how important it was for me to get paid to read a book, to study for an exam that may not mean nothing, but it's just the point. You're getting paid to get this education, to take it back out and do something with it. And it's also about advocating for the people who don't get those opportunities at all. So one of my ideas is to create a community like scholarly space where former activists can come in to the institution, into this WashU bubble, and we can have a revolutionary study group where we can start reading about class, where we can start reading about sexuality, where we can start really getting into critical theory about race when we can really start having statistics and facts, and we can start being like, oh, this is why I feel the way I feel. Oh, there's an ease in that frustration. There's a release of anxiety. There's power in that, and we deserve it. And I think letting the kids know that there is power in that, with whatever route you want to take. But definitely, like, getting into these institutions, and they're gonna make it accessible. We're gonna make it accessible for you to get there, and they're gonna do it for free. Like, I think that's super important. See you two up there.
How do you understand and experience the intersection between queer activism and Black Lives Matter, and like what are the struggles associated with that, and how does that impact like your perspective and identity within the movement?
Oh man, coming out ruined my life. Coming out ruined my life. It was terrible. I was very celebrated when I was straight, and then I had a beautiful partner who is someone that is subject to men's desire and sexism in a way that I did not experience. And for us to get together, but to also be leaders, and then to be queer, so to be queer Black women leading a movement brings about a different type of turmoil from the people standing next to you, and there's a level of paranoia in that will kill you. Not knowing who you're standing next to, knowing who you're standing in front of you, and knowing that they hate you, but not knowing if the person next to you that's supposed to have your back hates you, or hates parts of your identity, or only just wants parts of you to show up, it's scary. And it's one of the main reasons that I stopped. I caught my charges, but I was also thinking about getting out then, because there was just so much happening. We were being accused of so many things, and it was a cover up for homophobia. It was a cover up for jealousy. It was a cover up for sexism. It was a cover up for misogyny. It was all these bigger things, and it was coming out and being projected in different ways. That's scary. You have to think about yourself at that point. You got to censor yourself, and that's you can still do the work in that way. You can step back from being such a visible force and shutting stuff down, and still be a force. And I think that was something that I had to learn. That is what the intersection of queer identity and being in such a Black movement taught me. And also, taking the space to educate. As a masculine-centered person, there are different dangers that I experience, and I experience dangers in themselves. But being able to talk to the folks who respect me, and having conversations, and talking about sexuality and this destruction of the Black family, or how it's kind of ruining their Black movement, or how it's important to think about how all Black people are not only leading this movement, but are a part of it, and we're dying too. And we may be dying for different reasons. I may be dying because I'm queer, not because the police shot me, but because you shot me, bro. That's a real conversation to have for talking about domestic violence and how that is intermixed into our communities, and how Brittany has a very valid reason to be scared of you, or to be scared, you know what I'm saying? Those are real possibilities. Those are real realities for folks. And it was hard for people in the movement to want to see that, or to want to address that, because it wasn't about that. It's like, well, we getting free. We're not just getting free from police brutality. We ain't just holding this mirror up to these folks. We gotta look at ourselves. And if we don't look at ourselves, dog, we ain't getting nowhere. For real. This ain't about them, it's about us. Yeah, did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Who do I have? Got you in the back.
Okay, so at our institution, we have a lot of, our students are experiencing a lot of racial tensions, which is understandably because people are really upset. And so our campus is having a big push for inclusivity, which is awesome, but everybody just seems to be talking be more inclusive, and there's not really being anything being done. It just feels like there's a lot of talk and there's no action, and everything just seems to stay the same. It's just really frustrating to watch, because it's just a lot of talk and there's nothing being done, and to mend the tension between people.
What's your question?
I don't know how to fix the tensions, or how do we as a campus come together and have better relationships with each other.
You got friends?
Yeah.
Do they have friends?
Yeah.
Cool. Y'all should set up a meeting in your dorm, library, whatever. Y'all should talk about it. Talk about what you want to do, and you should actually do it. You should not be scared to do it. And you should talk to black people on campus, and you should get their perspectives. And you should bring them, not just get their perspectives and take it back to your room. You should invite them into these rooms to tell you their perspectives, and you should write them down. And then you should have further conversation with them and further discourse, and see where you can go from there, and see if you can bridge that gap and organize together, or if you're going to organize separately for the same things, but you're just going to do it a little differently. That's cool too. But communication, like real communication, and it takes balls to try to do that. But if that's what you want, if you really want that change, what institution do you go to?
College of St. Benedict.
Cool. So then, yeah, you got the ability to make something happen. Get something in the college paper about some real organizing. Do it. That's how you start.
So I'm just wondering, like, as somebody like who's white, how do you balance like a healthy amount of guilt for the privilege that you have that like spurs you on to like act, and then like not getting crippled by like how much injustice there is to the point where you're just defeated and you don't want to do anything? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you balance it so you do something with the privilege and you act versus just like sitting around going, I don't know what to do, I can't do anything.
My first response to your question was, I have no idea, because I did not know how to deal with that type of guilt. But I would say sit in that, and I would say hold it, and I would think about how that feels. And then I would put my shoes on, and I would go to a protest, or I would figure out what the next protest is, and I would show up, and I would sit in my guilt while I'm at that protest, and I would continue to sit in that guilt. You don't let that guilt cripple you. That guilt not crippling you. Put your shoes on. That's very ableist. That's a very ableist framework. Sorry, I take that back. That guilt is not impacting how you show up. You still have the ability to put your shoes on and show up. You still have the ability to get out there, do it. You still have the ability to talk online. You still have the ability to talk to people that you know saying some racist stuff. You still have the ability to shut things down in your classroom. I know they say racist stuff in there too. We hear it all the time, the racist undertones. I don't know, Easter's getting ready to come up. I don't know if y'all going home. You're going to hear a lot of stuff at them dinner tables. Passed already? Wow, sorry. They got me though. They got me in the front row. Whatever next holiday is coming up. Some hard conversations can be had. And I think that that's the time to have those conversations. And I also think that's a way to rid yourself of that guilt. Because you did some work. That's some work. It's a little bit of work, but it's some work. And you did it, and you can keep doing it. And you can just see where the guilt goes from there. I don't think it's going to go nowhere. It's going to be there because it's just the way it's set up. It's just the way it is. We have a history and a reality that is unfortunate. But getting out there and just starting to act, that could be helpful. Realizing that it just is what it is. This is the reality, and this is just what I have to do in order to be a better person. It's not about getting rid of your guilt, it's about being a better human. And how can I be a better human tomorrow than I was today? How can I show up better tomorrow than I did today? And I think that that's how you should see it. I think that that's how you should frame it. And take the guilt out of it. Let the guilt do what it's going to do. Who was a lot of hands? I don't know where I was at. You ready? Yeah.
So I don't know if you're familiar with Ida B. Wells. In one of my courses, we read her autobiography, Crusade for Justice, and it really talked about kind of like how she was really radical with what she did. And we talked about in class how that's a lot different from how Martin Luther King or even Frederick Douglass went about civil rights, and how people usually take more to like Frederick Douglass and how he's more remembered than Ida B. Wells is. So I should know your opinion on like, do we need kind of the Frederick Douglasses to, you know, kind of have a more like diluted version of like a movement that people can like take to better and remember? Or do you think that we need like both are still good?
You need
or
all of them.
needed?
You need all of them. You need all of them. Ida B. Wells and Frederick Douglass are both major people, and you should not only have read Ida B. Wells' biography, but then you should go read Frederick Douglass' biography. You should think about how the politics are different and why they're different based on the intersections that they show up in as a black man and as a black woman. and the ways in which they organize, and why that organizing may have looked different, and why Ida B. Wells's activism was more radical than Frederick Douglass. That's important. All perspectives are important. All of them. You should read all the books. What's up, man? And then I got you right here.
Thank you so much. So, yesterday in the movie I saw children. I just want you to talk about children showing up. So, in whatever way you want to talk about that, put it in any perspective. I'm so interested in that. Like, and maybe you can link it to your experiences. I don't intend to get personal, but like, if you feel comfortable talking about that, like, was that how you grew up? This is a movement, this is a struggle that has been around for so long. I imagine, like, even when you grew up, is that something that what we saw in the movie, like children showing up alongside their parents, is that something that you experienced, and is it part of what actually exploring your interest, or what would you generally like? Just anything say about that aspect of what we saw in class?
That's a great question. It's important to bring the kids to the protest. I think it's important to take them home at a certain time when things get bad. They cannot experience a certain type of violence. They're going to experience it, but they shouldn't experience it that young. So Brittany, for instance, would take Mackenzie home. She would bring her out during the day, and if things got bad, she would take her somewhere else. But it's important for kids to be there. It's important for kids to see what's happening and to see how police respond to how they show up to fight for their lives and what that looks like and the ways in which the police think about them, because they're going to go to school and they're going to have their programs and the police are going to say all these great things to them and it's not applied to them, and they should know that. Unfortunately, those are conversations that we have to have with our children that other people do not have to have. Those are experiences that our children need to have that other children do not have to have, but they need those experiences. For sure. I have some other friends, Erin Banks and Kara Banks. Kara Banks is a really great psychologist. You should look her up. She has some great videos. And they would bring their boys out to the protests. And I think that radicalized them in a different way. They have a different way of talking about things. They have a different way of seeing things in the classroom. They have a different way of seeing things at the grocery store. You know, Mackenzie's going to notice just different things, and she's going to point them out. We're going to go into space, she's going to ask, why is it so white? Or she's going to go to a school that's a private school that she was trying to get her into. She's going to be like, it's too white for me. This is uncomfortable. And she's able to have the discourse and to talk about it openly, but also there's a why. You know what I'm saying? She knows why this is happening. And I think that there's that taking away that sort of ignorance that is also supposed to be like this innocence. I think that has to go. I think that kids need to know what's going on out here. I think they need to know what they're subjected to. So when they get in these classrooms and they have these kids saying something racist to them, it isn't like it hurts, but it's not like a taking it back. Like, oh shit, like what is happening? You know, I'm different. I don't think our kids should have those experiences. I think they need to know that before they step into these classrooms, before they walk down these halls, before they walk down these streets. Because we never know if that's going to be the end or not. You not knowing how to respond, or you not knowing what to do or how to show up, that's going to be the end. And that's a very far intersectional way of thinking of things, but is it really knowing what happens to Tamir Rice? Driving down the street and seeing kids, black kids playing with toy guns, it scares the shit out of me. Like, put that up. Even if it's got a different color, even if it's green or orange, put it up. You know, and it's just, can somebody who's gonna identify that, oh, he got a gun, he need to put that away. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think kids need to know what's going on. I think kids need to have the opportunity to lead. I think it's important for kids to be at the protest and to handle the bullhorn and they get to chant. I think it's important for them to know what that power is. I think it's important for them to hear their voice early. Not just outside of talking, but that screaming. We always tell kids to keep their inside voices. Black kids need to be able to scream. They need to be able to say, they need to be able to hold protests at recess, whatever they want to do. Organizing it early, no. But they need those opportunities. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. What do I have? I had you. Yes.
So you talked about how, for you, mental health changed in some ways when you started engaging in activism, and that was actually a part of your healing, which, not mental health and healing is really never done, I think, for most of us. But can you talk about some of the specific ways that you have used anger and a sense of and injustice to kind of motivate you versus kind of letting that compound, especially in going through activism that is challenging everyday violence and dealing with sort of both traumatization and re-traumatization and keeping yourself grounded in who you are and the beautiful things that you are fighting for as well as anger?
That's a great question. I think I say in the speech that Michael Brown began to save my life, and I don't go further into that because it comes up in questions. So on July 6, 2013, I was in a car accident. I lost my dad, I lost my uncle, and I lost my partner at the time. I made it out of the accident alive. And I struggled with that until about 2016. But going outside and somebody handing me a bullhorn one day dramatically changed my life because it gave me something bigger to fight for. I did not, it's a way of running from yourself, but it's also a way of, it's a relief. It's a way of getting out of your head. It's a way of focusing on something else, something more important rather than shitting on myself all day. And thinking about what ways I want to think about dying when I get home. It was life changing for me. But then I started to get you start getting heavily involved in the activism, and there's a certain type of depression that comes from that. You just get defeated, you get tired, you get to the point where it's just like you not only fighting the state, but you fighting your own people. They fighting each other, like they trying to fight you. You just trying to live. You just trying to show up. You know what I'm saying? You just trying to be an effective leader. And that was heartbreaking for me. That was heartbreaking to be treated in such a way by my own people. And that's just me being real. It sucked. It sucked to know that I had brought so much of myself. I had brought all of what I had to this movement. And it was not appreciated by the people that I was fighting for. And they don't owe me that appreciation. That's something that's mine at home. But the ways in which I was treated sucked. And so that took me into a whole different type of frame of mental health that became paranoia. I reacted in violence. I was angry. I took that out on my family. I took that out on people that I love. I destroyed relationships because of it. And just realizing and finally seeing yourself, again, reflection, and saying that, you want something different for yourself. You want to do something different. And so I'm so thankful for the opportunity to go to WashU and to get away from the turmoil of the movement and the turmoil of the trauma that I suffered with the accident, and just being able to have a new chapter and to write something different than what I was writing before, and to not have everything so intertwined. And going to therapy. Therapy is so important. Please go. Please go to therapy. But yeah, being able to go to therapy and just being able to be in a different space, and having people around me that tell me how brilliant I am and give me affirmations that I need to hear and how important my work was, and seeing people like y'all give me a standing ovation for something that I was terrified to say because I didn't know I sounded smart enough. No, really, it's a real thing. So that's affirming in itself, and that's a different type of feeling. Being able to intellectualize my experience has been very, very given, very important to my development. Yes.
Kind of on the note of sounding smart, I really do appreciate that you are your authentic self when you speak, and you can tell it in your voice that you're not trying to sound like someone that you're not. And so I just wanted to know how much of trying to sound smart has been a pressure for you since you've gone to college?
I do it with every paper. And somebody reads it, and somebody's like, "Can you just say what you're trying to say, please? I already sound smart. Can you put the thesaurus down? And can you just say what you're trying to say? And you're gonna sound brilliant." And so I struggle with that with everything that I do, every paper that I write, every discussion post. trying to formulate my questions for class when I'm reading something, making sure I'm annotating everything. And I think part of that is racialized, trying to show up as, trying to show that I'm deserving to be in this top 10 institution that was not necessarily made for me to be there. It did not necessarily want me in this space, but has accepted me and tolerates me in it. And just trying to prove that I'm worthy of being there. And just, it's a constant battle every day of being like, no, you definitely deserve to be there. And then so like, and just owning that has been really important for me, for sure. Yes, I see you right here in the middle.
Thank you for coming. I think you're very worthy of being here. I'm just wondering what motivates you when you start to feel defeated.
All these people in the front row right here, for sure. All these people in the front row right here motivate me. I have 2 nephews, Miles and Jackson. They motivate me. They are lights. Mackenzie motivates me. Just people that I know, my little cousins admire me. They look up to me so much, and I didn't know it, but they do. And that's amazing to know that. Like I'm putting on for people. I'm building a legacy for folks. I'm making my dad proud. That is motivating. Knowing that my dad is proud of me. I did this like psych reading, or like one of those readings. And it was really helpful. They're not supposed to be helpful, but it was. She really knew what she was talking about. But what she said was that without knowing me, she said that your dad thinks you're more brave. He thinks you're braver than he ever was, and that was something to hear. I have always tried to make my dad proud. Always. I've always tried to make him happy. And that motivation that I know that I'm doing it, that keeps me going. That makes me get back to writing this paper and writing it harder than I did the first one. It makes me throw my head into these books. It makes me focus on getting this degree because my grandparents they just wanted to get that piece of paper. And when I get it, it's going to make them so happy. My mom's going to be so proud of me. And that keeps me going, for sure.
I know that we have a lot of questions left, but we do want to make sure that the rest of the presenters have enough time. So if you have any questions, I'm sure Alexis will stick around for a little bit.
Can we get like 3 more though? Can we do 3?
Yeah. We'll do 2 more.
We'll do 2 more. You pick.
I'm not doing it. You do it.
What's going on in Ferguson now? Is it better than it was before Mike Brown, or is it the same?
It's the same. It's the same. It's the same. Yep, that's about all I'm gonna get to that one. It's the same.
I'm Abraham.
Abraham, how you doing?
I'm good. I was wondering, trying to draw nexus between my country where I came from and your movement. Like my own country, when the young people involved in violence, involved in sectionalism, regionalism, the government by then established institutional and behavioral change. So I was thinking to your movement, you're advocating for blacks in America. How can you bridge the gap between the blacks and the whites for them to change their attitude and behavior? Because when I'm coming from one of the most segregated states in America, that's Wisconsin. When I used to go to the northern part of Wisconsin, where the blacks are mainly the African Americans, the way you are seeing they are doing things sometimes sadden me, because I sometimes even feel ashamed of being black. The reason behind that, the way they are doing things there, like involving themselves in drugs, addiction, violence, and other stuff. So I was thinking with this as a black advocate. So how can you be able to change these young people, both I'm talking about both the whites and the blacks, how can you change their mentality, how they can change for them to be a good black people in America, for them to be a law-abiding people. So I want you to just to
Oh man, I'm the wrong person to ask that question. It's a good question. It's just something I'm equipped to answer it because, I think people, I'm always going to be people are going to do what they got to do to survive. All the time, however that looks, they're just going to do what they have to do to survive. Specifically, black people are going to do whatever they must in order to survive. James Baldwin says that. And that's why he's optimistic, because he knows black people are going to do what they have to do to survive. In regards to bridging the gap, like I said earlier, I think it's about conversation. I think it's about real hard conversation, because I think you have a good question, but I think you're going to run into some folks who are going to have a lot of pushback for you, and it's righteous. While your question is righteous, so is their pushback. And so I think that getting in those rooms and having those conversations, and not even rooms, like I said, it's at the chicken spot. They're going to have some pushback for you at the chicken spot, for real. But talking to folks and really understanding their perspective and where they're coming from and how it differs from your experience. It's important how your experience is similar, how it's different, and then being able to come up with something and to plan something and to organize something around your similarities, but also consistently censoring your differences, not forgetting them because they exist, but censoring them. I think that's how you bridge the gap, man. I think that's where you start, for sure.
So if you would all join me in thanking Alexis for coming.